This is Retail Voices, the podcast where leaders from the world of retail and outside of retail talk straight about what really works. Insight, innovation, and the human side of the industry all in one place. Hosted by Mark Lack. That's me. Let's dive in. Hi RJ, and welcome to Retail Voices.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really pleased to be here.
Oh, it's just great to have you here. In this episode, we're diving into AI-powered retail messaging, customer experience, and what the next era of digital communication looks like for brands of every size. RJ is the CEO and founder of Backstroke, a platform built to help retailers send smarter, high-performing customer messages powered by AI. And his background spans Exact Target, High Alpha, and multiple startups at the intersection of marketing, AI, and human connection. So I really have a lot of questions for you, but let's start with you. You've spent years in the messaging and marketing tech world. What started you on this path, and what was the broken moment that made you want to build Backstroke?
Well, Mark, I wish I had a great answer but it actually was just coincidental. In 2004, I graduated from college. I had an English degree and a business background. And I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. That's what I would have told you. But I might have also said I want to be a professor because I ended up I had an English degree. I ended up getting a master's in creative writing. And I'm really interested in creative process and creative in general. But I needed to get a job. And so I had a friend who was working at a tiny startup. It was called Exact Target. I literally didn't really understand what they did. And it was 2004. And it was just the emergence of email marketing as a channel for digital marketing. And I took a job, believe it or not, as a deliverability consultant. I was the first deliverability consultant hired by Exact Target, which allowed me to get really close to our customers, learn how email is sent, the technical stuff underneath, as well as the strategic stuff on top, and worked really closely with retailers ranging from Home Depot to Nike. I mean, I was, and working with big brands on deliverability best practices from technical to strategy. And then, so anyway, I got started. It's sort of an unglamorous answer, but maybe more common than we realized, which is like, I had a friend that worked at a company, got me a job. I said, I'm going to work there for 6 months until I go to grad school. And then I ended up working there for 10 years. Wow. And during that time, we got acquired by Salesforce. And then I was the VP of product for all messaging products, including email, SMS, and other channels for the Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And I found that there was a nice blend of my interest in creativity because it's all about being creative and messaging in combination with emerging technology as it came out. I was an early adopter of all the mobile tech. I was the third in Indianapolis to have an iPhone, and I was on the board of the Mobile Marketing Association. I mean, I was early to all these technology capabilities and then blending it with creativity and marketing strategy. So I've always, in my career, found myself at the emergence of new technology. I had another startup that I sold to Shutterstock. And then to answer your question, I saw the emergence of the GPTs coming out in the early 2020s, started experimenting with them and thought, wow, here we are on the precipice of a new type of capability that can be married with my background in email and mobile messaging. And I dove right in. And no pun intended, but that was the start of Backstroke.
Fantastic. I mean, obviously, from the 2020s, all the different GPTs that have sort of come up and all of the AI explosion. And I think everybody has been for the last couple of years at a stage of FOMO in terms of AI. So it's interesting. It's an interesting time for everybody. You've got, on the one hand, you've got all the people who are scared that it's going to take everyone's jobs and this and the other. And then on the other hand, you've got corporations and organizations, even small ones, that are spending huge amounts of money on it right now. And I mean, I get a lot of messages per day because I'm connected to a lot of retailers because I like to see what they're doing, to see what
Hmm.
they get up to. Because, steal with pride, as I've done for a number of years, when you see something good from one retailer, then, why not use it in your own business?
Yeah.
Um, AI messaging can sometimes sound abstract or overly technical.
Mm.
For a typical retailer, what does Backstroke actually change in their day-to-day communication with customers?
Yeah, well, everything is the short answer. I can, but it's all based on a brand foundation.
Mm,
Because marketing, it has to, like, each retailer has its own vibe, its own brand, its own style, its own story that it wants to tell, and it's a big mistake if retailers hand it over to AI and say, "Hey, just send a bunch of messages." So, Backstroke, I mean, whether using Backstroke or not, marketers need to make sure that they are training the LLM or training the machines to make sure that it represents their brand first and foremost. And then what Backstroke will do, or what we can talk about Backstroke or not, but what brands want to do is understand what are some options that
mm,
can be generated that align with our brand and with our messaging. So you don't go down the technical route, or you don't go down the sounding too much like AI. And then that can be either the start or the finish of a campaign. And then it's up to the retailer, the marketer, to act as a strategist, a brand steward,
mm,
really kind of the person responsible for what sounds like them and what sounds differentiated. Backstroke will generate options for the marketer to pick between. And then we go a step further where we'll actually predict which option will drive the best performance
okay.
for specific subsets of your audience. So you can generate many options, select which ones you like or don't like, and then say, all right, these are the candidates that we want to put out into the market. And then Backstroke will match that to the audience that is most likely to resonate. And it might be Gen X or Gen Y or Gen Z. It might be
Mm,
generational. It might be where you live in the world. It might be how loyal of a customer are you, or are you just new to the relationship with the retailer? So different types of messaging work depending on your demographic or your attitudinal dimensions or where you are in the relationship with the brand. So but it all starts with that brand foundation. What are the
mm,
words? The words you say, what are the emojis that you say, what's the tone and the style, what emotions do you say, what slang do you use?
yeah.
Some retailers get really jargony, very technical in their language, and others don't want to get there. So it's like not only like Gen Z slang, are we going to use like the latest hip sounding words, but how
Mm,
technical about the stitching or how technical about the fabric or the zipper. I mean, like those types of things too. Like how technical are we to get, how jargony, how slangy, and then how do we bubble that up to sounding like your copywriters wrote it? Because I would not recommend handing everything over to AI. Instead, your copywriters or your humans are going to be writing content that is going to be in very strategic places. And,
mm,
I tell most of the retailers we work with to think about the 70-30 rule, that
okay.
70% of your campaign execution can be done by AI, but 30% still needs to be done by that human. And so you want to make sure that those are two married together so you don't end up sounding this way in one world and then that way in another. So it's got to really be aligned, again, based on that solid ground foundation.
Yeah, and I think that is sometimes the problem is that I've been in front of a lot of um, companies that are selling us an AI system.
Hmm.
Um, and unfortunately, a lot of them seem to think that the AI can do the heavy work without really explaining to us how to do it. And I think what you've just explained there is probably the best explanation I've actually heard so far in
Good.
terms of what AI is there to do. Um,
Yeah.
it has to represent your brand like it is a marketing person.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but the first thing you have to do is you actually have to tell it what your brand is
Yes.
and
Yes.
who
Yeah.
you are and how you
Yeah.
do things.
Yeah. You know what's funny, Mark? I've found it surprising that many brands that we work with or we're looking to work with, I say, hey, do you have a brand guide? And the most common response I get from somebody on that question is, oh, we're working on it. It's not quite done yet, or we're updating it. Or I found that when a brand hires a new creative director, they redo the brand guide. And so that document or that asset is actually very outdated. And
Yeah.
so without a document, how could anybody, like any human, know that we say these words or don't say those words? Or how could an agency maybe that you hire know these words and those words, or these phrases or these emotions are appropriate? Much less how would an AI know? How would the machine know? And so there is some foundational work that needs to be done in order to
Mm.
exploit these capabilities. But it starts with having a document or a set of foundational principles about what your brand is. And the tricky thing is that's always evolving. And you end up with like, who's the person who's been at the brand the longest? And what is their subjective view of what their brand is or isn't? Like that ends up being the style guide. And
Yeah.
that's okay. But if you want to compete in this world, that needs to be documented as well. And I always say, start with some always and nevers. Like, we always say this, or we never use the ampersand. We always use these dimensions, but we never use these emojis, or, that type of stuff. It's a good way to kind of document some things. And those are the types of instructions that are very helpful to a brand foundation for an LLM or a machine like Backstroke.
Oh, I mean, it's. I mean, every time I've created a different channel, so even for retail voices,
Mm,
I actually have a brand book or a guideline
nice.
for it in terms of what it is,
Yeah.
and what it's supposed to be, and also what it's not. So when
Yeah.
when I'm thinking about guests, when I'm thinking about scripts and questions and what kind of questions I can ask, I
Yeah.
always then put it through the AI for that particular thread and say,
Yeah.
okay, based on this person, based upon these questions, based upon what I want to achieve, give me a rag, the red, amber, green, in terms of
Hmm.
whether this is a viable, even at a guest level, whether it's a viable guest.
Yeah.
And I think not a lot of people do that. They'll just, okay, bring
Yeah.
anybody in and
Yeah.
hope for the best that they've got something to speak
Yeah.
about. So yeah, so we'll get back to a question now that I'm
Yeah.
back again. But yeah, so from a brand book perspective, I understand that completely. The other thing that I look at is what um, not just what we think as a business about what the brand is, but also speaking to a few customers, because they also will tell you what your brand is, and sometimes it might be
Yes.
very different from what you actually believe it is.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
and that's always difficult for a marketeer or a brand owner to actually hear, because
Hmm.
they can be very, very different things. Um, that Backstroke talks about dramatically improving conversion and revenue uplift through automated AI generated messaging. What actually drives that uplift, and how much of it is AI versus brand strategy or data?
Yeah. Well, what we've done at Backstroke is create a set of algorithms that map to the demographic profile of top performers in
Mm,
the retailer's list. So, what is the demographic profile, and/or what are the patterns of behaviors that lead to increased purchases? And that's actually something AI is really, really good at, which is to
mm,
understand patterns that a human may or may not be able to detect. And by identifying those patterns, then we can say, all right, we know that people who have a similar profile of Mark, like, let's say, red shirts,
mm,
or they like to see three emojis in their subject line, or they like to see imagery with lifestyle shots instead of just discounts, or they like to receive messages this many times a week before they buy. Those types of patterns allow us to then just kind of rewind the tape and say, all right, should we send this message or not? What is the variant of this message that should perform? And that's an easy way to. I don't want to say it's easy. It's like every marketer would agree that sending the right message to the right person at the right time is
yep.
the right thing to do. And what we've been hamstrung as humans by time, and we've not been able to create all of the different creative variations because maybe we know Mark likes red shirts and RJ likes gray sweatshirts, But now I have to ask my designer to create two different assets. And then if I have 10,000, 100,000, or a million people on my list, I've got to create all those different variants. That's overwhelming from
Yes.
a creation, from a QA perspective, from a storage, from a digital asset management, like all of the different components there. And so we've sort of just acknowledged, oh, that's too much to do. We're going to just go what we normally do, which is send the same thing to everybody. And you'd be surprised by how many retailers just send the same thing to everybody
Oh,
because it works
I
well
know.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works
I
well
mean, it's
enough, and
scattergun.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
because, I mean, we started talking about personalization 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago,
hmm
but it never really came off because there
yeah,
wasn't the capability of the systems to deal with
correct.
that.
Yes,
And so what we ended up doing was we sort of had categories for people. And
yes,
we had groups, which made it easier
yeah,
because instead of having, a million different customers that we had to deal with, which we could never have
hmm
dealt with at the time, we
yeah,
had 17 customer
right,
category groups, and that can be managed. And I remember, I mean, I started doing this particular podcast 2.5 years ago when I was looking at it and buying my equipment. And I'll always remember it because it's something I bring up quite often. I purchased my mic, which is here, yeah,
yeah,
and it's a nice mic and it works very well. I purchased it from a very large global e-commerce retailer. I
okay,
think everybody knows who that is. Within 7 days of me actually getting my microphone, the first advert that popped up was for microphones.
oh yeah,
I thought, well,
yeah,
I've just purchased, I don't need another microphone. Maybe I need the boom arm. Maybe
yeah,
I need a
right, right,
new,
right,
whatever on it. But I don't
yes,
need another microphone when I've just purchased quite a good microphone. Um, so that sort of got me from that perspective when we're looking at personalization, because if even
hmm
Amazon couldn't do it, then how
hmm
can smaller guys? But I
yeah,
think now with AI, it allows
yeah,
you to look at different things. I mean, we set up our customer engagement program and we were able to look at very limited things like purchase habits of certain items. So,
hmm
Nescafe Red Mug, the 50-gram jar, we could
mm,
work out from that the purchasing habits, whether it was a single person household, a couple, and then what their cycle of purchases was. So we could send a
hmm
reminder that maybe your coffee is about to run out.
yes, yes,
But anything more than that, I couldn't do. It felt like
yeah,
personalization, but it wasn't really because I was using
right,
very limited information.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and I suppose many retailers, and we were talking about this earlier, many retailers still see communication as an afterthought.
hmm
Um, it's not very much to the fore, and
hmm
marketing people tend to be a little bit off the side. Um, so, do you think customer messaging is now a core business competency on a par with merchandising or supply chain?
Yeah, 100%. Yes, absolutely. I think that retailers have to be in that game, and I'll tell you why. Um, it's table stakes because so many of these brands want to go D2C, and retailers have always had the advantage of the customer that they could really use to get the brands to do what they wanted them to do, and that's still a lot of the case, but what I see is that brands think, oh, now how can I create my own audience? How can I cut the retailer out so that I can restore my margins or operate with or without the flex of these retailers? So I think enough brands have demonstrated that they can operate D2C, and then they're going to retail, trying to get distribution through retailers after that the landscape's changed. So yes, I think retailers then think, all right, how do I get the customer to come back in to not only buy this item, but actually the other swath of items and not buy those things directly from a subscription service or from one of my competitors, et cetera. So yes, absolutely. I think that, um, and I think retailers already know that.
Yes.
But I think the competition has forced it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the first one I saw, I think, was during the first year of the pandemic, and it was actually a DTC from Heinz for their
Mm,
soups.
hmm.
And I think it was in the States because I watch all the stuff in the States. I watch Europe and I watch the Far East. But I think that was from the States. And it was the first time I'd ever seen something direct from Heinz to
Hmm.
the consumer where
Yeah,
you would buy, 12 soups or a mixed box
yeah,
of soups.
hmm, yeah,
And I thought that is starting to change things.
yeah, yeah.
And I think at the back of it, they were using Amazon Logistics or something.
Hmm,
Um,
hmm,
so that was interesting, but you see it more and more now, where
hmm.
the manufacturers are actually going direct to the consumer.
Yeah, yeah,
It's almost like somebody like Heinz can now become, a farm shop
yeah,
where they
yeah.
can deliver it to you.
Right. Yeah, it's wild. And breathing out of retail for a second, but what's shocking to me is actually watching the pharmaceutical
Mm.
industry emerge as a D2C player. Or I think that is, I mean, like it's very early days there, but
Mm.
it's wild, you know. And
Yes.
so and you can see a lot of innovation happening there. That actually some retailers might want to look at the innovation coming out of pharma. The industries are distant enough, but oftentimes we look too close, I think, to
Yes.
ourselves for best practices or what is our competitor doing or whatever when we can actually look at some real rapid innovation on the D2C side and on the messaging side that seems to be working. I know there's deregulation and other
Mm.
dimensions that are impacting all that, but that's yeah, it's a fascinating shift
I agree.
happening there as well as in retail.
And I think it's worthwhile, looking outside of, fixed industries. I mean, most of my time has been in the grocery business, but I have stolen things from clothing, textiles.
Yep. Yeah.
I think it was Nike that was doing some ambush marketing,
Hmm.
um, and I've used that a couple of times
Yeah. Nice.
because it was very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a very good way of doing things.
Yeah.
Um, I suppose if I look at myself being of the older generation, um, there's a fear still that across retail that AI automation will make brand communication feel generic or robotic.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
see it in a lot of, again, I get lots of marketing mails every day. And one of the biggest indicators is the M dash um,
But yeah.
that AI seems to use all the time. And we
Yeah.
tend, as humans, when we're writing emails, we tend not to
Hmm.
use M dashes. But AI
Yeah.
likes M dashes because it uses
Yes.
English correctly as much as
Hmm.
possible.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
how do you balance automation at scale with with authenticity and brand voice?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so you're talking to the wrong guy on that one, Mark, because I am I have a creative writing, I have a master's in creative writing. So like, I love an M dash. I think
Mm.
it's cool. I love, someone told me that you should never use a semicolon because all it shows is that you took some English class or something. And like, I think, I think some of those techniques, but I think a lot of copywriters would agree with me that like writers like to use these different techniques because
Mm.
it, spices things up. I think the M dash has gotten a bad rap with marketers as kind of the signal that AI is being used, and
Mm.
I mean, there's kind of two dimensions to that. One is like, you know, like what's going to like and we've already seen it that AI companies and companies like Backstroke, we say, hey, do you want us to use the M dash or not, or do you want us to use
Mm.
this signal or not. There's some phrasing that happens often in AI language, which is kind of the point counterpoint. The AI seems to like that, and then the different models tend to have their own way of speaking. So it's pretty easy to identify a ChatGPT driven creative in comparison to something that came out of Claude.
Yeah.
But that's like kind of early days. And I think maybe the underlying signal there is that marketers want to look at each other and be like, gotcha. like I see it. I gotcha. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the consumer really can do the same kind of gotcha. But what the consumer will do is they'll say, "This doesn't sound like the brand. This sounds different." So they might not say like it sounds like AI, but they are going to say it sounds like sounds different than the brand. And I do this survey out to consumers every quarter. I've done it for the last 4 years and now 1 quarter, where I ask a set of consumers, randomized consumers, 500 consumers, can you tell if this is AI? Can you tell if this is AI? And like I give them samples and which of these are AI, and they can't tell. Consumers cannot tell. They can't tell.
It's getting better.
Yes, and they also can't tell the difference between AI generated content like imagery and or animated GIFs and those that were human generated. And so the risk here is not that some marketer is going to like out you as an AI user, because we're effectively all AI users, but instead that the brand is going to degrade itself by not sounding like, and that'll be slowly all at once, Mark, because some marketer who's a performance marketer will say, that doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and use the M-dash. No, that doesn't matter. Let's go ahead and say it this way. That doesn't matter. And then you suddenly end up with this word soup. Yeah, that's just like AI optimized garbage. And they'll get short-term performance lift, and they'll probably get like a raise or a promotion, and they'll be gone from the organization. But the lasting impact on the brand will be there. And we're in this early days where there's kind of two camps. There's a performance marketer and then there's a brand marketer. And the performance marketer is looking for the short-term win to make the numbers this month, this quarter. And then the brand marketer is at the table pounding their fist saying, no, that doesn't sound like us. That doesn't sound like us. And looking like in the wrong light, they're looking like they're old school, or they're looking like they are a gatekeeper.
Yep.
So like there's some interesting politics going on inside organizations between these creatives and the performance marketers. And it really is up to the leader, whether the CEO or the CMO says, no, we need to balance both, or they say, no, the brand marketer wins. And then the performance marketer is like, well, screw this. I'm going to go somewhere else where I can actually drive the performance that we need. But if that CMO says, let's lean performance, they're really going to jeopardize the overall performance. So it's about leadership. It maybe I'm answering your question with like, it's about the leader. Like, how can the AI empowered leader honor both brand and performance so that their brand can stand up to these other AI powered brands? Because we all are going to have access to the same set of tools, and and so how are we using those tools to compete? And if a smaller brand can effectively leverage those tools so that they can compete at a level that challenges some of these more established brands, then we're going to see some big changes, and I think that'll happen. So anyway,
and that's a good
small
thing.
question, but I think it's a bigger one. So
no, it is. I mean, it's a good thing because it does mean that some of the smaller retailers that are about can actually start competing with the very big boys on a direct marketing level or a customer communication level that they've never been able to before. Whereas now they can start doing that. But of course, there is some risk because we were told in the early days, and we're still told it a little bit now. When you look at things like privacy, and when you look at data that we have, don't upload all your data to ChatGPT because then it's with everything else that's sitting in there. And people are talking about over messaging. What about things like hallucinations, especially when it comes to the brand? Because sometimes I used to work for Circle K, and I've created a shop interior with the Circle K logo, and it doesn't quite come out as Circle K.
Yes. Yeah. I think that there's visual variation, and then there's also written content to worry about there. But side note, Mark, my son begs to bike to school on days where the temperature is there because he and his buddies go to the Circle K and they go get slushies.
Fantastic.
So I mean, truly, Circle K is like, and I can get that kid to do any chore in our house because he wants to go to Circle K. So I appreciate the Circle K brand a lot, and I don't want to bastardize it in any way. But there, back to the question, which is about visual and then written stuff. So um, uh, AI does try to match the creative, but try to is the problem. So it ends up doing its best approximation of what that logo is, what that color looks like, and some of the visual dimensions. And so it is up to the creative team to make sure that it is within the boundary of what they will accept. There are different visual things that happen to things like logos, such that some AI solutions won't even allow you to mess with brands or with likenesses because there's some legal challenges to doing that. So they'll actually block from creating all those. But others that do, color variation, bleed, treatment, shadowing, those types of things all emerge from brands. On the text side, it's a little bit of the wild, wild west, to be honest. And the hallucinations are worth reading through because um, I've seen things from the best models out there change prices, for example, and that's concerning. There's, like if you're going to change if it ends up changing the price and you don't catch it, that's concerning. And then we all can point to examples of where AI models have generated another finger or generated a third leg or something nutty that happens in the image, and we've seen examples of that actually make it all the way to front page news.
The
So
production. Yeah.
there's a visual dimension as well as creative, and this is the challenge with AI, which is like we think, oh, we're getting things done faster, and we're still human, and sometimes we don't proofread.
Yes.
Or sometimes we don't give it another glance because we're trying to regenerate and then get to a deadline or publish or push to our partner or whatever the case is. And just like if inexperienced human were doing the work, that can get by even the most seasoned of marketers or seasoned of leaders. And the problem is there's sort of like less forgiveness for AI generated content as compared to maybe a lower level employee. The
Mm.
old trope has been like, let's just blame the intern. We'll blame the intern. And we'll say, oh, the intern is sorry and the intern was whatever. But like, it's actually not the intern's fault ever. It's the person who approved the intern's work whose fault it is.
Yep.
And like in that scenario, we can all kind of chuckle along. We're like, oh, the intern, or like I did goofed on the intern's work. But like, and those both can be forgiven in a way that's not being forgiven for AI because AI is used as seen as like a cheat or a hack or lazy.
Yep.
And I don't know. And so there's like less forgiveness. Another thing I've said I do that survey out to US consumers on a monthly or a quarterly basis. I've done it for the last 4.5 years. And I ask consumers, what are the words that you think of when you think of a brand using AI? And for the last 3.5 years, the number one word has been lazy. Number
Wow.
one, lazy.
Wow.
And then number 3, 4, and 5 are always negative, like boring, risky, those types of words. But something happened in Q4 of last year, Q4 2025. The number one word was innovative.
Wow.
And then the second word was future looking. So, and then it became very positive. Lazy is still on the list, but it was number 4. It wasn't number 1 anymore. And if you go into the data, I end up finding that people who view AI as lazy have really negative perceptions of it, typically coming from their experience with AI call centers,
Ah.
where they're trying to get to answers and they're trying to press zero. They're saying operator, operator, operator. Like they're trying to, like that's where that's coming from. They also tend to be 60 years old or older. They tend to skew women, and they tend to be in certain parts of the country. So it's interesting but the number one thing that's different about them is that they're not using AI.
Yes.
And they're not using AI for personal or work purposes. I asked that question. Are you using AI like, Claude, Gemini, Anthropic, whatever, for personal or work purposes? And the people who over-index on calling AI lazy are not using it. So, I think there will always be a subsegment of the population that doesn't use it, but that adoption curve has spiked. So many, most people, around 85% of people claim to have used AI for personal work privilege purposes. And those people view AI as innovative and future
Yep.
looking
Yep.
and that type of stuff. So there's a perception shift in the consumer market, but I think still marketers like to point out when when another marketer gets it wrong, and it's sort of a popular thing to do is to like zing them. So,
Yes.
and that can hurt your brand, and
Of
that
course.
can hurt your brand, that can hurt your perception. At maybe the best, the worst is you publish something that costs you a ton of money, that is an egregious error, that's an offensive error, that is somehow racist or misogynistic, or it is like actually very, very harmful, and that is a risk for sure. But then there's this like that's the there's so that's something to be aware of. And then there's kind of like the honest mistake, like I
Mm.
didn't double check the price before it went live, and I can't blame it on the intern anymore. So
But those things happen in, when we used to do the paper catalogs and send them out.
totally,
There could be a
yes,
price incorrect, and that's why we always used to have I think it was E and OE statement at the bottom in very small letters.
yes, yes,
So emission and errors exempt or something like that.
yeah,
I think it used
right,
to
right,
stand
right,
for.
right, right, yeah,
Whereas we tend not to do that as much anymore with the small
yeah.
print. Um, and one of the things you said before is that great messaging is the heartbeat of customer experience. So, in your view, what do most retailers still misunderstand about customer experience or CX in 2026?
Well, I, I think that, you were actually talking about this earlier, Mark, and I think that when you talk to a retailer or a brand marketer, they'll say something like, "Our customer is," and then they'll fill it in, and they'll generalize in pretty aggressive ways.
Mm,
Um, and I've now talked to some brands that'll say things like, or some retailers and brands, they'll say, "Oh." They'll like use this, like, well, he is this, or if it's a women-focused brand, they'll say, "Oh, she is this," and that gets to it. And then a lot of marketers have gotten down to like they'll have personas, like maybe
yep,
three
yep,
personas or maybe five, and they'll kind of bubble up everything and say these are the personas of the archetypes that we're pursuing, and those three or five. But I think we're living in a world where everybody expects extreme personalization, and there's this whole kind of I mean, you can see it within the Gen Z trends, especially that everybody views themselves as very unique. I am unique. I am different. I am not one of your archetypes. In fact, I don't want to be categorized as such. And the internet like loves to place a label on something,
yep.
and marketers do too. So I think that it's there's a tension because a brand or a retailer is going to say these are the things we stand for. These are the brand pillars, the core messaging, that type of stuff. But then they have to figure out how to make it resonate with individuals um, in order to be relevant. And I, I think that's just a giant challenge. And I
It's
think that
huge.
whoever gets AI to work within a set of boundaries to personalize will win. And we're already seeing it, but
Mm.
that's the technology is now here, and consumers demand it, and brands that are going to win are going to Exploit both.
they're going to exploit that. And I think the other thing is that when you look at people's attention spans nowadays,
Yeah.
I mean, I do stuff on Instagram, I do stuff in TikTok especially.
Mhm.
And I was looking at some of my stats for TikTok the other day, and it shocked me that I had a 0.9 second standard view rate.
Oh my God.
Um,
Wow.
and apparently that was good, that
Ah.
people looked at my front bit for zero point
Yeah.
0.9 seconds. I still had something like 4 or 5% of people watching it all the way through to the end. But based upon the views and just the shifting down,
Yeah.
if I have to try and introduce my brand to somebody in 0.9 seconds, that is tough. And if we look ahead, this will only get worse because,
Yeah.
I mean, even from your perspective, what do you see as the major shifts in retail marketing and digital communication because of what's happening with AI, data, and automation?
Yeah. Well, I can go literally all day long about the shift to hyper personalization. But what's interesting is actually the counter trend.
Mm,
I had the good fortune of being at an executive retreat about maybe 3 weeks ago
mhm,
with senior leaders from retailers from all over the globe. And they were talking about how they are really investing in in-person experiences,
mhm,
in pop-up shops, in um, customization workshops, in in-store, in-person, in real life personalized experiences, and that consumers are tired of like uh, getting targeted in the same ways
mhm,
and buying the same thing that everybody else has. And so what they're craving is things like thrift shopping
mhm,
or discovery and finding something that's uniquely mine. And this is a lot driven by Gen Z, but it's also driven by a lot of the technology overload that we're all a part of. And so, how can I create an authentic experience? How can I really interact with people who are either representatives of the brand or the retailer? Or how can the retailer facilitate an experience that is, in fact, differentiated? And
mm.
so, several of the retailers were explaining their in-store experiences that 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 just killed it. From a that they generated all sorts of organic content on social from people who were there. They had lines wrapped around the block. They had sales that exceeded one of their stores,
Wow.
and so it's this like counter trend almost that is almost as interesting as what's happening in AI. So it's like the AI component is hyper personalization, getting down to the individual, but then there's this quest or craving for in-person, personalized, rare discovery. Those types of things are the counter trend. So how can a
It,
retailer
it,
do that
it
as
is
well?
driving it. I mean, it is definitely driving it. I mean, I've been in retail grocery stores for 40 years now, and I hold my hand up. I've been responsible for some of the depersonalization of the stores themselves. We just ended up with a sort of beige box with
Mm,
beige shelves
yeah.
with the same products on them, and walking 20 or 30 meters down the same aisle in this store that
Right.
I'd work in that store. And you actually couldn't tell where you were from a
Right.
brand perspective.
Hmm.
Now, over the last 10 years, I've been trying to take all that away again, and introduce, shopping zones and shopping areas, and,
Yeah.
and bring back the butchers and the bakers into the
Right.
stores so you get that sensory effect, because that's what it used to
Yes.
be like.
Yeah.
If I go into some of the stores in the UK at the moment, they are soulless, unfortunately.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, Whereas I go into some of the stores and some of my own stores, even in the Middle East, and there were places of experimentation, there were places of
Hmm.
innovation, there were places of, oh, what can I find today
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
stores?
Right.
And I think that's what people are looking for because,
Yeah.
that, and especially coming out of the pandemic, one
Yes.
thing proved is that, local community stores were really the saviors when people were locked down, because these stores stayed open. and manage to serve their customers with a smile behind a mask and a plexiglass sheet and
Yeah.
all of this kind of stuff, you know. And in fact, we were sometimes, and I recognise this when I went visiting the stores during that time period. You know, sometimes we were the only people that that person had spoken to for days in a
Yeah.
live environment.
Right.
You know, so it's something that I've driven over the last sort of 5 to 6 years in particular, is that the store is the community.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's very important. And when we look at the smaller stores, you know, a lot of the big businesses, they can heavily invest in tech, but then fail to see results.
Mm.
So if we're looking at the smaller guys and the bigger guys, what are the most common mistakes that they make when trying to modernize their marketing stack?
Mm. Oh man. I think imitation is the most one, is the most. They'll say, "Hey, this competitor is doing this. We want to do that. We want to do it too." And that's I think that is the biggest mistake I see.
Mm.
And it's not I have a strategy. It's just we're going to copy theirs. And you're talking about like gray or beige boxes, gray boxes. Like AI optimizes to the meat. And it's funny. I talk to a lot of brands who say, um, who will listen to somebody on a panel, for example, or listen to a podcast like this, or they'll read a case study or something like that, and they'll say, "We want to do that." And then you'll say, "Well, why? Like, tell me, like, what is the strategy here?" And they're like, "No, we need to adopt AI. We need to do it now, or we need to drive this." And I get that. I understand that. But again, it's kind of back to like short-term win. And if it's not ingrained, then ultimately you don't have a brand, you know? And so it, um, it's yeah, I think that a lot of brands, a lot of marketers don't realize that applying best practices or a copycat strategy is a short-term win, or maybe they do know it, but they don't acknowledge
Mm.
it and say, "Hey, this is our copycat, but we're actually going to put our strategy in place over here as well." And it's short-term thinking that ultimately leads to short-term results. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And I think, you know, you talked about it earlier in terms of your surveys that you do in the last quarter in particular, and what's changed, because the adoption isn't just a technological shift.
yeah,
It's actually a culture shift within the organization
yes,
itself.
yeah,
So teams need to start thinking about roles and skills,
yes,
and the
yes,
biggest one, which is the mindset. Because as you say, you know, people are saying, "Oh, it's lazy."
yeah,
I mean, I do remember when we started using AI 4 years ago. Even I felt myself using it. It felt lazy.
yeah,
Um, but over time, obviously, I've sort of graduated myself into thinking, no, this is really productive,
yeah, yeah.
because I can get a lot more things done with it. So, how do we get that mindset change? You said it's already started, but how do we make sure that mindset change is sort of locked down?
Well, it's measurement is like from a leadership perspective, it is measurement. How are you
Mm.
measuring the impact of the technology investment or the AI that you're implementing? And it could be the number of experiments that you run and say, like, we're going to do an experiment each week, and the result doesn't matter, but we're going to look at the win or the fail and then understand it. But we're going to do 52 experiments this year, and we're going to share it. I know one brand who has created a dashboard that counts the number of hours saved by AI, and that each department has a certain goal in terms of the hours saved, and they look at it on a weekly basis and then in their management meetings. So that could be a potential way to do it. But I've seen organizations in the past uh, reward failure as a way to incent people to take more risks, because
Yep.
ultimately, Mark, what we're talking about is risky. And as humans, we are programmed to avoid risk. Like in our DNA. We are trying to look and act and fit into the group. And what we're doing right now is it's risky. We're experimenting in a way that we don't know what the official answer is, and
Mm.
so instead we're trying to mimic, or we're trying to say we're going to do it like that, like the a brand that we see being successful, or their version of it that's published in a case study. And so whatever leaders can do to incent through activity and rewarding or acknowledging failure in an authentic way, I think is the way that we're going to get over this hump. At that same event that I was at, the somebody smart on the panel said the work of 2026 is to experiment with an AI. Like that
Mm.
is the work. I think you use the term FOMO, which I love. I think there is this feeling of like everybody else is ahead of me, everyone else is ahead of me. I think that there are maybe some brands that are way ahead or some retailers that are way ahead, but I think everybody's thinking the same thing. We're all feeling like, oh, we're behind, we're behind, we're behind. And oftentimes when that anxiety strikes, we avoid. As humans, that's
Yes.
what happens when you have anxiety, you avoid and you go back to best practices, what's working, or you say, I'm too busy too. And then meanwhile, somebody else is racing ahead, or somebody has created a innovation team, or someone's created a incentive that is driving people to experiment in a safe way or in a safe place. And then in 2027, we're going to wake up and be like, okay, let's go and do what that brand did, or let's go what that retailer did. But then, it'll be too late to get any margin on that win. So we have to embrace an experimentation culture, reward failure, and measure it in some sort of number of, or hours of, or potentially revenue derived from,
Mm.
in a way that isn't feeling risky to humans that are risk averse.
I mean, that's, yeah, I mean, humans risk averse. There's a lot of retail CEOs that I know, and I've been there, that are also fairly risk averse.
Yeah.
So I'm going to slightly change my next question for you. Um, I'm the retail CEO, and I always get my CTO and my CMO
Yeah.
asking questions and wanting money generally, because
Yeah.
these are
Of
guys
course.
that these two are the ones that spend money.
Yeah.
Um, what questions should I ask them? Because they're both going to come at me with this, because the tech guy is thinking, oh, great, more money, I need this, I need that. CMO is going to say, great, I need this and I need that. So they're both going to come at me with questions.
Yeah.
So what's the one question I should really ask them both?
I would say, I like the headline game. Um, in 2 months, what's the headline? And then what's the sub bullets here? Like, what's the headline that you're going to deliver? And then what are the three bullets underneath it? And like, make them commit.
Brilliant.
And whether or not they achieve that is a different set of questions. But like,
Mm.
what is their vision for this? What is the headline? Is it, brand has saved X amount of hours? Um, we we reduced backfill by X. We increased partnership dollars by this, and we increased brand equity by X. Like, those are the three bullet points that lead up to that headline? Or is it, retailer drove X amount of revenue? Or is it retailer adopted AI with this new blank? What is the headline that they envision? What is their vision? What are the supporting metrics underneath it? Not, did you buy an enterprise-wide license of, whatever platform? And that's often where it is. It's like, hey, we need to buy this enterprise-wide platform of blank. And it's like, well, why? Well, because everybody's doing it and we've got to experiment. What is the outcome that you imagine in these 2 months? Who has the bigger vision? Or not the bigger, but like, who has the vision that aligns with what yours is, or what you've told the board, or what you've told the market? Like that's what I would do. And then in 2 months say, all right, let's sit down. Did we hit the headline or not? And then figure out what the consequence. And that word is a neutral word, because it could be like, what's the consequence? Well, we need to invest more. Or
Mm.
the
Yes.
consequence is we did hit those numbers, or we were really wrong about what we thought, or we failed miserably. So I don't know, like but consequence or the outcome is what prevents people.
Yeah.
Actually, the other one, Mark, is like, who will write the headline? Because
Yeah.
if they won't write the headline, then they're like, oh, I'm just going to try stuff. Well, cool. But what's your point of view? Like, yes, we want to try stuff, but what is the point of view? What is the headline um, that we will either say we got right or not? It's, it's just standard like hypothesis testing. I like the headline game because it's
No, that's a very good one. I mean, it's interesting as well that using the word consequences, because people tend to put that in a negative light,
sure.
rather than actually seeing, well, consequences and output.
Yeah.
It's what's actually
Yes.
happened,
Yeah.
and that could be amazing or it could be
Yes.
awful.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we learn something from both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah, yeah. I found more and more with retailers, it's hard to pin them down on a metric that they are, Backstroke, we do a lot of POCs with customers.
Hmm.
And a proof of concept is like, what are we proving here? Do we want to do X hours saved or X amount of revenue, or like, are we just seeing if it works? But what
Yeah.
is the metric by which you're going to understand that this is successful? And
I
I,
think part of that problem is as retailers, we measure nearly everything. If
mhm,
you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Is one of our
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
mantras,
sure.
and we measure every little thing. I think because we've had relatively low margins and we've been trying
Yeah.
to improve the EBITDA and trying to improve the profitability of the business,
Yeah.
it's like we slice it all like a salami, and a 0.01% extra margin
Yeah.
on the likes of Walmart's, $500 billion sales every year
Right.
is a huge amount of money. And I
Yeah.
think we've made everything so efficient that
Yeah.
we're not able to focus on some simple things
Yeah.
to make the organization work. And
Yeah.
realistically, retail is very, very simple.
Hmm.
It's basically three parts with three jobs each. We have the front door where the customers come in and we do the checkouts. We have the store floor itself, and then we have the back door where we having the goods come in. And
Yeah.
if we look at each of those areas, the back door is basically three jobs. Take the stuff off the lorry, check it's for us, and put it in the warehouse.
Yeah.
It's that simple. On the shop floor, you have a product on a clean shelf with a price ticket.
Yeah.
It's that simple. And then at the checkout, you say hello to the customer, greet the customer, you scan the goods, and then you take the money.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Retail
Yeah.
is 9 jobs in total,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we make it very, very complex,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yeah.
it's just the way it is. So, talking about retail and retail 101 online in particular, and we always try and break everything down into those three simple things.
Hmm.
So, products on a clean shelf with the price ticket.
Yeah.
If you were to try and sort of condense everything down from what we've discussed today, what would those three simple things be that you would want the listeners to understand or to take away
Yeah.
from this?
Yeah. Oh, this is a good question, Mark. I like this. Let's keep it simple. I would say one, um, for AI to succeed, you need to set and manage your brand foundation. Um, we talked a lot about that here today, but like, what is the brand foundation? What are the non-negotiables? What are the things that you stand for? Everything down to visual as well as creative components. Um, Second, what is the definition of success in your AI approach? Like, is it that you just have an AI thing, or that it delivers an outcome, either time or revenue or savings or something like that? Um, and then uh, I would actually say, what is your AI and ethics strategy? What's allowed, what's not allowed? What happens when somebody tries to zing you on social? What happens when somebody has a concern about something, or when an accident happens? And I think with those three foundational pieces, you'll have the foundation, kind of the rules and the measurement for understanding, the adoption of this new tech. And I
Mhm.
think those will change in a year or two, but I think right now those are the three things that need to be in place. And then that can apply to all sorts of adoption of technology or capability or experience and how it intersects with everything. But I think those three are where I would go.
Brilliant. That's fantastic, RJ. Um, I mean, all of my questions have now been answered.
Great.
I'm still a big proponent of AI, and I think people should be experimenting and investigating a lot more than they are, and over time that adoption will get stronger. So everyone, thank you very much. That was RJ Taylor, CEO and founder of Backstroke, sharing invaluable insights into AI, customer communication, and the future of retail messaging. It's now time to say goodbye from RJ. Goodbye, RJ. And goodbye from me, of course. We'll be back soon with another Retail Voices episode. Check out retail101online.com for details of upcoming guests. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss an episode. Welcome to the Retail Education Revolution. Thanks, RJ. That was excellent.
Thank you.